After Jesus rose again, he appeared to Peter on a beach with some food, with a meal, with some fish. Where was Peter? He was back fishing. He went back to what he knew because it seemed like the whole thing about Jesus bringing in a whole new kingdom that would supersede the Roman kingdom, it looked like that had failed. So he went back to what he knew. So he's there fishing. He looks up to the beach and he sees Jesus. And he says, "It's the Lord." Puts on a cloak, puts on his new garment and dives into the water and goes straight to Jesus. I would have loved to have been there, wouldn't you? To look up and see Jesus and see Peter's reaction. "It's the Lord." What a great reaction. In fact, that's how we approach life in the kingdom. We put our focus, we put our gaze on Jesus. And when we see Jesus for who he is, you can't help but put on your new cloak, who you are in Christ, and dive in and go towards him. In the Old Testament, there were serpents that were biting God's people in that day. Some were dying. So the answer was to put a serpent on a pole and lift it up. And as they would focus on and gaze at that serpent on that pole, they lived. And the principle here is that when we focus on Christ, it's not just a glance, it's a gaze. See, that serpent on that pole, that was a type of Christ. That when he was lifted up on the cross, he became sin. He became sin itself. And he exchanged our life, our sin, our death. He exchanged all that, put it on himself, and then gave us his life. There was truly a great exchange. But life doesn't come from just glancing at Jesus. It's got to be a gaze. It's got to be a focus. It's got to be something sustained. That's the only way you overcome your addictions, your depression, your problems, is when you do what Peter did. It's the Lord. Put on your new man, your new who you are in Christ, your new identity in Christ, and you dive into the water and you go straight for Christ. A key focus, a key principle in life is, what are you focusing on? What are you putting your gaze on? You see, what you focus on is what you become. It's as we focus on Christ that we become like him. We're not focusing, we're not gazing at ourselves. We're not focusing on what the world says, what my flesh says, what my past says, what other people say. We're focusing on Jesus, who he is, what he's done in his finished work, what he's doing, what he's going to do. And it's not just a glance. Remember, those in the Old Testament didn't just glance at that serpent on the stick. They gazed at it. And that's what we do. And as we gaze on Jesus, as we focus on him, as we see him for who he is, we're changed in the twinkling of an eye. It changes us. Our thoughts change. Our emotions change. And because of that, what we do, how we act changes. So it's all about focus. So I ask you the question, who are you focusing on? Why not focus and gaze upon Jesus? Dive in and enjoy the communion. Enjoy the feed. Jesus did say this, come and dine. Enjoy the dinner.